Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The journey begins. Ana Silva adjusted the strap of her overnight bag as she strode through the bustling corridors of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Her pilot's uniform was immaculate, her captain's stripes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The terminal buzzed with the cacophony of announcements, luggage wheels on tile, and hurried conversations. Ana moved with a quiet confidence born of decades in the aviation industry. After a grueling week piloting international flights, she was heading home for a brief but much-needed respite. A Boeing 747 captain for over a decade, Ana had seen it all: turbulent skies, delayed landings, mechanical malfunctions, and even a few emergency situations. Yet, nothing compared to the satisfaction she felt every time her wheels touched down smoothly on the runway. Her dedication to her craft had earned her respect among her peers and admiration from aspiring pilots. But the journey had not been easy. Ana's path to the captain's seat was marked by challenges, many of them unrelated to her flying ability. As a black woman in a field historically dominated by men, she'd faced more than her share of raised eyebrows, skepticism, and outright prejudice. Yet, every setback had only fueled her determination. She glanced at her watch, 2 hours before her connecting flight to Denver. Just enough time for a coffee. The coffee shop line was long, but Ana welcomed the brief pause. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister, Mia. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Mom's making her famous roast chicken. You better not cancel again." Ana smiled. Family dinners were a rare treat in her fast-paced world. She quickly typed back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." As she reached the counter, the barista, a young woman with a radiant smile and silver nose ring, took her order. "Medium dark roast, black," Ana said, her voice calm but warm. The barista glanced at her uniform and beamed. "Captain. That's amazing. My little brother just started flight school. He'd love to meet someone like you." Ana felt a familiar warmth at the admiration in the woman's tone. "Tell him to stick with it. The skies are worth it." Coffee in hand, she made her way to the gate, where her crew was already gathered. They exchanged tired but cheerful greetings, the camaraderie of shared experiences lighting up their weary faces. "Heading back to Denver too?" asked Carlos, one of the flight attendants she'd flown with several times. Finally, Ana replied. "Feels like I've been living out of a suitcase forever." As boarding began, Ana's status automatically upgraded her to first class. She found her seat near the front of the cabin and settled in. Though she wasn't flying this leg, her pilot instincts remained sharp. She discreetly observed the pre-flight preparations, noting the efficiency of the cabin crew. As the plane filled, Ana's presence in uniform attracted some attention. A young boy across the aisle pointed at her and whispered excitedly to his father. Ana gave him a small wave, her heart swelling with pride. Moments like these reminded her why she endured the long hours and endless challenges. But not everyone was as welcoming. A middle-aged man in a crisp suit stopped abruptly as he reached the first-class cabin. His eyes narrowed when he saw Ana in her uniform. He leaned toward the flight attendant assisting with seating. "Isn't this the pilot's lounge or something?" he asked, loud enough for several passengers to hear. Ana didn't react outwardly, but the comment stung. The flight attendant, a seasoned professional named Linda, replied smoothly, "No, sir. Captain Silva is a passenger on this flight." The man huffed but said nothing further, moving to his assigned seat a few rows back. Ana took a slow, steady breath. Over the years, she'd grown accustomed to moments like these, but they never truly lost their sting. As the plane taxied to the runway, Ana gazed out the window, the lights of the city twinkling below. She thought of the young boy's awestruck expression and the barista's encouraging words. For every naysayer, there were countless others who saw her as an inspiration. She leaned back in her seat, the hum of the engines a familiar lullaby. Tomorrow, she'd be home with her family. But tonight, she'd carry the weight of her journey, knowing that every mile she flew was a step toward breaking barriers, not just for herself, but for everyone who dared to dream beyond the horizon. An unexpected encounter. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Anna let herself relax, or at least tried to. The first-class seat was a welcome change from the tight confines of the cockpit she usually occupied. Her uniform, perfectly pressed at the start of the day, now felt slightly stiff against her skin after hours of wear. She shifted in her seat and pulled out her tablet, intending to review some industry news, but her thoughts wandered. The journey home was always bittersweet. While she cherished the chance to reconnect with her family, these rare breaks reminded her of how much she'd sacrificed to chase her dreams. Birthdays, holidays, even her mother's 60th birthday party, all missed for the call of the skies. Her reverie was interrupted by a flight attendant. "Captain Silva, can I get you anything?" Anna smiled politely. "Just some water for now, thank you." The flight attendant nodded and disappeared toward the galley. As Anna waited, she noticed the man in the crisp suit from earlier, glaring at her. He was seated in the aisle seat a few rows back, flipping through a magazine with exaggerated intensity. "Excuse me," he finally said, his voice cutting through the soft hum of the cabin. Anna didn't realize he was addressing her until his tone sharpened. "I said, excuse me. Are you a pilot or a passenger?" Anna turned to face him, her expression calm but firm. "I'm both, sir. I've just completed my flight duty for the day and am traveling as a passenger on this leg." His lips twisted into a smirk. "Funny, I've been flying for years and never seen a woman in the cockpit, let alone," he let the sentence dangle, his eyes scanning her uniform skeptically. The conversation had drawn the attention of several passengers and one of the flight attendants, who approached cautiously. "Is there an issue here?" the flight attendant asked. "Not at all," Anna said smoothly, her tone professional. "The gentleman here was just curious about my role in aviation." The man scoffed but said nothing further, returning to his magazine. The flight attendant gave Anna a small, apologetic smile, before retreating. Anna's thoughts raced. Encounters like these weren't uncommon, but they always left a bitter taste. For years, she'd dealt with the silent, or not so silent, judgments about her place in a world that didn't always welcome her. But she wasn't about to let someone like him tarnish the pride she felt in her achievements. The flight continued without further incident until meal service began. The flight attendant, now visibly tense, approached Anna again. "Captain Silva, I apologize, but there seems to be an issue. Would you mind stepping into the galley for a moment?" Anna rose, her curiosity piqued, and followed the attendant to the small, bustling space. The lead flight attendant, Linda, was waiting for her. "I'm so sorry to bother you," Linda began, her voice low. "But the passenger in seat 4C is insisting that he deserves your seat in first class. He's claiming there's been a mistake in the seating assignment." Anna blinked, her exhaustion momentarily replaced by disbelief. "He what?" Linda sighed, clearly embarrassed by the situation. "He says it's inappropriate for someone who's not actively flying the plane to be sitting in first class. We've explained that you're a passenger just like everyone else, but he's insistent." Anna pressed her lips into a thin line, the frustration simmering beneath her composed exterior. She took a moment to compose herself before responding. "I'll speak with him," she said finally. Linda's eyes widened. "Are you sure? You don't have to." "I know," Anna interrupted gently. "But I think it's time we clear the air." Anna walked back to the cabin, her posture as straight and commanding as if she were addressing a crew before takeoff. Passengers watched with interest as she stopped by the man's seat. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I understand you've raised concerns about my presence in first class." The man looked up, clearly surprised by her directness. "I just think it's odd, that's all," he muttered. "Odd?" Anna repeated, her tone slightly sharper. "Because I'm not actively flying this plane?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Well, yeah. First class should be for, paying passengers." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Let me clarify something for you, sir. I've spent over 2 decades in the aviation industry. I've logged thousands of flight hours, navigated through storms, mechanical failures, and emergencies to ensure the safety of passengers like yourself. The seat I'm in was earned, not given. And while I may not be at the controls tonight, I've done more than my share to deserve a moment of rest on this flight. The cabin fell silent, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. The man shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding her gaze. And for the record, Anna continued, her voice unwavering, the seat you're in was also earned. Not by entitlement, but by the hard work that allowed you to buy a ticket. Let's respect each other's journeys, shall we? The man mumbled an apology, his earlier bravado gone. Anna nodded and returned to her seat, her heart pounding. She wasn't one for confrontation, but this moment had felt necessary. The silence in the cabin lingered for a moment before it was broken by a slow, tentative clap from one of the passengers. Others joined in, the applause spreading until it filled the cabin. Anna looked around, her cheeks warming slightly at the unexpected support. As she sat down, the flight attendant brought her a fresh glass of water. That was incredible, she whispered. Anna gave her a small smile. Sometimes you have to remind people that the sky doesn't care who you are, it only cares how well you can fly. She leaned back in her seat, the hum of the engine steadying her once again. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to fully relax, knowing she'd stood her ground not just for herself, but for everyone who dared to challenge the status quo. Breaking the silence. The energy in the cabin settled back into a calm rhythm as the flight continued. Anna stared out of the window, her reflection blending with the deep black of the night sky. Above the clouds, the world felt quiet, vast, and full of possibilities. But despite the peace outside, her mind was alive with thoughts. Moments like this always left her torn. On one hand, she was proud of herself for addressing the man's disrespect directly and with grace. On the other, she felt the weight of constantly having to prove her worth in spaces where she'd earned her place 1,000 times over. She glanced across the aisle and saw the young boy who'd pointed at her earlier. His wide eyes were fixed on her again, his expression now one of unmistakable admiration. His mother noticed, smiled at Anna, and mouthed, "Thank you." Anna gave a small nod, her earlier frustrations easing. For every skeptic like the man in the suit, there were those like this boy, dreamers who saw her as a symbol of what was possible. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice beside her. "Captain Silva?" Anna turned to see a flight attendant who'd been working in the economy cabin. She looked young, probably in her mid-20s, her nervous energy evident as she clutched a small notepad. "Yes?" Anna replied gently. "I'm sorry to bother you," the attendant said, her voice quiet, "but I just wanted to say thank you. I've been following your career ever since I started working here. Seeing someone like you in the captain's seat, it means everything to people like me." Anna's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "People like you?" The flight attendant nodded, her eyes glistening. "Women. Especially women of color. I've been struggling lately, wondering if I'm good enough to move up in this industry. It's hard not to feel invisible sometimes." Anna felt a wave of understanding. She reached out and placed a reassuring hand on the young woman's arm. "I know exactly how that feels. But let me tell you something, being invisible doesn't mean you don't belong. Sometimes, it just means you're paving a path that others haven't dared to walk yet. And that makes you stronger than you realize." The attendant smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you, Captain. That means a lot." As she walked back toward the galley, Anna's heart felt lighter. These small moments of connection reminded her why she fought so hard to claim her space in the skies. The rest of the flight passed uneventfully. Most of the cabin's lights were dimmed as passengers settled into their seats for the overnight journey. Anna closed her eyes, her mind drifting back to her earliest days in aviation. A memory from the past. She was 24 when she first sat in the cockpit of a Cessna 172, her hands trembling as she gripped the controls. It was a modest plane, nothing like the jets she commanded now, but to her, it was the most beautiful machine she'd ever seen. Her instructor, a gruff but encouraging man named Dave, had taken one look at her and said, "You've got the spark. But spark alone doesn't fly planes, skill does. You ready to earn it?" She had nodded, her jaw set with determination. Those early years had been grueling. Flight school wasn't just about learning how to fly, it was about enduring the doubts, the dismissive looks, and the unspoken questions of whether she truly belonged. One day, after a particularly challenging training flight, another student, a young man with an air of arrogance, had said, "Why don't you try something easier, like flight attendant training? You'd be great at that." Anna had bitten back her anger, her voice steady as she replied, "Why don't you try keeping up with me in the air?" By the time she graduated at the top of her class, she'd silenced every doubter in the program. Back in the present. The sound of an overhead announcement brought Anna back to the present. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Denver. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and tray tables are stowed." Anna straightened in her seat, watching the city lights grow brighter as the plane descended through the clouds. Her heart swelled with anticipation at the thought of home, a place where she could shed her uniform and simply be herself, if only for a short while. As the plane touched down smoothly on the runway, Anna felt a deep sense of gratitude. Every landing, whether as a pilot or passenger, reminded her of how far she'd come. A final test of resolve. As the plane taxied to the gate, Anna noticed the man in the suit shifting uncomfortably in his seat. When the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers began collecting their belongings, he hesitated before standing. "Captain Silva," he said awkwardly, stepping into the aisle. Anna turned, her expression neutral. I want to apologize," he said, his voice quieter now. "I shouldn't have said what I did earlier. I guess I wasn't used to seeing someone like you in that uniform. But that's on me, not you. You've clearly earned it." Anna studied him for a moment before replying. "Thank you. It's not easy to admit when we're wrong. I hope this reminds you to look past appearances in the future. You'd be surprised at what people are capable of if you give them a chance." The man nodded, his face tinged with embarrassment, and shuffled past her toward the exit. Anna exhaled, letting the tension of the day drain away. She gathered her belongings and followed the flow of passengers off the plane. In the terminal, a group of travelers paused to thank her for her service, their words genuine and heartfelt. Anna smiled, knowing that moments like these, small victories in the battle for respect and representation, were what made it all worthwhile. As she stepped outside into the crisp Denver air, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges she faced were far from over, but neither was her journey. And with every flight, every interaction, and every barrier broken, she knew she was soaring closer to a future where no one would ever have to question if they belonged in the skies. A new horizon. As Anna walked through the terminal toward the baggage claim area, the hum of activity seemed to fade into the background. Her mind was still racing, processing everything that had happened during the flight. The challenge, the response, the way she had found her voice again. It was moments like this that made her realize how deeply she'd internalized her journey, not just as a pilot, but as a woman, a person of color, and a trailblazer in a world that still often felt like it didn't know where to place her. She moved through the airport with a quiet determination, the familiar rhythm of her steps grounding her in a way that felt almost meditative. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to check. It was a message from her mother. "Dinner plans for tomorrow night?" Anna smiled, tapping out a quick reply. "I'll be there, Mom. Can't wait to see you." Her mom was her rock, the one person who had always believed in her, even during those first uncertain days when Anna had been the only woman at the flight school. Even when there were so few role models to look up to, her mom had never doubted her. She reached baggage claim just as her suitcase came into view on the carousel. She grabbed it, adjusting the strap on her shoulder as she walked toward the exit. The sun had set, and the crisp evening air of Denver greeted her, clear and cold. She inhaled deeply, the coolness refreshing after the warmth of the plane. Home sweet home. Her cab ride to her apartment was quiet, the city's lights flickering past the windows like stars in a sky of pavement. Anna let her thoughts drift as the landmarks she knew so well passed by, the familiar stretch of the highway, the towering glass buildings that had been constructed since her early days in Denver, the quaint cafe she frequented on weekends when she had a rare day off. As the car turned onto her street, she could see her apartment building up ahead. It was a modest place, not much more than a few rooms, but it was hers. A place where she could finally let go of the persona she'd been wearing all day. The taxi came to a stop in front of the building, and Anna paid the fare before stepping out. She grabbed her suitcase, but before she could head inside, she paused. There, sitting on the stoop, was her cat, Luna, her large green eyes fixed on Anna as though she had been waiting all day. Anna's heart swelled with affection. "Hey, Luna. Miss me?" she asked, bending down to scoop the cat into her arms. Luna purred softly, content to settle against Anna's chest as they walked up the stairs together. Anna unlocked the door to her apartment, the familiar scent of lavender and vanilla greeting her as she stepped inside. The place was warm and welcoming, the kind of environment Anna appreciated after long, exhausting days. She placed her bag by the door, let Luna slip from her arms, and kicked off her shoes. She moved through the apartment, opening windows to let in the cool night air. As she sat on the couch, she pulled out her phone again, scrolling through the messages she'd received throughout the day. There was a note from Sarah, one of her fellow flight attendants, thanking her for the inspiration she'd shared on the flight. And then there was the text from James, her first officer on the Singapore flight. "You really handled that guy well. Not sure I could have kept my cool like that. You're a legend, Anna." Anna smiled and typed back a quick response. "Thanks, James. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Someone has to stand up for all of us who've had to fight for a seat at the table. Or in this case, in first class." She set the phone down and leaned back into the cushions. The long hours in the cockpit, the strange interactions with passengers, the subtle and not-so-subtle microaggressions, none of it seemed quite so overwhelming now. In the peace of her apartment, it felt like the weight had lifted. But there was still something more she needed to do. Something beyond just taking care of herself or dealing with the daily grind of her career. Reaching out to others. A few days later, after catching up on some much-needed sleep and spending time with her family, Anna sat down at her desk with a cup of tea. The quiet hum of her apartment filled the space as she opened her laptop, ready to begin her next challenge. It was time to make her voice heard, not just in the cockpit, but in a larger context. She had long been considering starting a mentorship program for young women of color who aspired to careers in aviation. She'd seen firsthand how hard it was to break into an industry that hadn't always been welcoming to people like her. But Anna knew that if the next generation of pilots, flight attendants, and aviation professionals was to succeed, they needed someone to show them the way. With a determined breath, she began drafting an email to a few contacts she knew in the industry. Subject: Mentorship for Aspiring Women of Color in Aviation. Dear Name. I hope this message finds you well. As you may know, I've been flying professionally for over 20 years, and during that time, I've witnessed the growth of aviation, both in technology and diversity. While much progress has been made, there is still much work to be done. In particular, I've noticed the lack of representation and support for young women of color pursuing careers in aviation. Over the years, I've had countless conversations with aspiring pilots, many of whom don't have access to the mentorship and guidance they need to navigate this industry successfully. I would like to address this gap by creating a mentorship program focused on providing support to these young women, sharing my experiences, offering advice, and guiding them as they work toward their aviation goals. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can make this initiative a reality. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Best regards. Anna Silva. As Anna hit send, she felt a sense of pride wash over her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about breaking through the barriers she'd faced. It was about opening the door for others, so they wouldn't have to fight the same battle she did. For so long, she had been fighting for her seat in the cockpit, but now she was fighting for something bigger, a world where the skies were wide open for anyone with the courage to take flight. Anna closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, a quiet sense of satisfaction filling her. She had done more than just survive in an industry that didn't always welcome her. She had thrived, and now, she was helping others do the same.